Hello, and welcome to our third session of Ed Talks, quick session talks that focus on economic development and recovery for our regional business. Thank you all for attending today. The Rockford Area Economic Development Council has recognized and reacted to serve our region in the best way we can to support our community efforts to respond, recover, and now reopen our local business and manufacturers. Please take time to reference the RAEDC website for additional reopen support and direction. As we look to the future, we at the RAEDC, in collaboration with Rockford University and the Peary School of Business, have been hosting frequent Ed Talks. These conversations will focus on the economic development issues we face amid this pandemic, with the purpose to provide expert guidance on how to adapt and overcome those issues. Today's topic is situational leadership, utilizing credibility and flexibility to lead. COVID-19 has demonstrated that there is an opportunity to recognize and celebrate different ways of responding to crisis, ways of leadership, and methods of accomplishing tasks. The ability to appreciate these different styles is critical to developing a well-rounded team that will contribute to the success of an organization. Dr. Mull will discuss how you can leverage and alter your leadership style to best lead your team through various developmental phases and contexts. About Dr. Mull. Dr. Mandolen Mull is the chair of the Peary School of Business, director of the Accelerated Business Program, and an assistant professor of leadership at Rockford University. Dr. Mull has a PhD in organizational development and change and an MBA in international business. Before coming to Rockford, Dr. Mull was a faculty member at Tarleton State University and the McLean School of Business at the University of Mary Hardin-Baylor, where she taught courses in business management, statistics, and international business. Prior to joining the realm of academia, Dr. Mull occurred over a decade of corporate leadership experience in the fields of healthcare, property preservation, and logistical distribution. Possessing an extensive background in leadership performance, Dr. Mull consults with organizations across the globe, providing analysis and interventions targeted to improve organizational performance outcomes. Dr. Mull also conducts scholarly research pertaining to leadership intentions, change management, and statistical analysis. Before we get started, at the end of this presentation, Dr. Mull will answer questions. Please submit your questions through the chat box function. I will read those questions to Dr. Mull at the end of her presentation. And now, with great pleasure, I would like to introduce my professor, Dr. Mandolen Mull. Dr. Mull?
Oh, thank you so much, Jared. And I just appreciate everyone dialing in today. These are really quite beneficial talks. I know they are for me, and they really spurred some great conversations throughout our community, and even expanding outside of our community, which is really, really lovely. So thank you so much for giving me a bit of your day and your time, and I hope to make it valuable and positive for you. The things that we're going to be talking about today, I want to start off by talking about building credibility, because credibility is our currency as leaders. And so if we don't have a strong foundation of that credibility, if we're not being, I think if you've listened to any of my other Ed Talks, you've heard me say that 90% of great leadership is being intentional, right? So that means that you and I have to constantly be evaluating ourselves. Do we have credibility with the people we need to have credibility with? And if we do not, how can we get it back? Have we lost it? Did we never have it to begin with? I was talking with a mentee of mine recently, and I went back home to Texas last week, and somebody was saying, there's a song, "You're always 17 in your hometown," and people want to talk about how you used to be, like they know you, they know who you used to be. And I say, when you say that, you kind of condemn people to a life without growth. So sometimes when we're working with our colleagues, especially in periods of crisis, we think we have someone's number, right? We think we know who that person is. We assume how they're going to react. We make a lot of judgment calls without considering contextual factors that are coming into play. And that's where we're really going to start talking about situational leadership today. So first and foremost is this idea that to build credibility with people, part of it is we need to allow them to grow. We need to understand that every single one of us is on the path of who we're becoming, right? Whether that any of us should be condemned to who we were. I hope we have not peaked too soon, my friends. I really hope we haven't. And so if we think about how we're building credibility, it's going to be the foundation of everything we do. And that helps us understand what's going on in different contexts. It allows us to be agile. It allows us to be adaptable and flexible, which is absolutely so very important in this post-COVID world, or current COVID and post-COVID world, where forecasting and predictions are very difficult. So I say we don't focus on that as much as we focus on flexibility and adaptability. And so that's the conversations we'll have today. So when we think about building credibility, so it's opening day, and I am a diehard Texas Rangers baseball fan, which means that I get my heart broken every season. But there's a lesson to learn from sports when we think about credibility. The qualifications and talent level of all professional coaches are really kind of the same, if you think about it. They typically have the same types of experiences, the same type of knowledge, and oftentimes even the same types of strategies. But really the big differentiator is how they inspire their people toward a goal. And in order to inspire our people, we have to have credibility with them. And so thinking about, why is it that, someone who used to be a great coach took their team to playoffs. I mean, I'm not talking about the Rangers, but I'm talking about the Rangers. Jeff Bannister, he was a great coach. The players loved him. And then something happened and they didn't follow him anymore. And he didn't get that back, right? So they didn't get rid of all the Rangers players. They got rid of Jeff Bannister, the manager, the skipper. So when we think about this, you and I as leaders, we have to be thinking about, have we lost our team? Has the context changed? Just because we were good at one thing doesn't mean we're always going to execute. Our intentions may be pure. Our heart may be in the right place, but sometimes we bungle the execution. And, I'm no different there. I certainly make those mistakes. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. We can build credibility with 4 different tools. The first one is competency. And competency is not just that you and I have knowledge of the work and what we're doing, but it's the knowledge to put the right people in the right places. And that means it's not always the same person and it's not always in the same place. So think again about sports, right? Your person with the best arm is going to be your pitcher. The person that can take a beating is going to be your catcher. I need to put my best players in the places that fit with their skill set. Now, we think we already do that because we have accountants and we have marketers, we have managers and we have frontline workers and we have executives and we have IT folks, and we mix everybody out. But the reality is, within your own departments, people have their unique skill sets, their unique strengths, their niche areas. And so you have to be thinking about, have I created my department, my team, my company, kind of like a sports team? Have I put the best players in the right roles? Guys, you think about it, with sports, they spend 90% of their time, watching film, right? Practicing, training, reflecting, 10% executing. In business, we flip that. We spend 90% of our time go, 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 go. And maybe, if we're lucky, 10% of our time with introspection, with reflection. And so this competency area of how we build credibility is you and I doing the legwork as leaders. It's you and I putting in that work, reflecting on what went right, what went wrong, and doing that on such a consistent basis that it becomes second nature, right? So that means it is going to take some intentionality. We are going to have to stop and start reviewing. And that can be really beneficial, but it's going to be crucial to help you build credibility with your team. Other components are capacities. So these are the areas in which you and I can grow. And it's where your team members can grow. So certainly, you know, that's skills, that's knowledge, attitudes, which are the hardest things for us to change. I always make a joke when I was a little girl, my mother would say, change your attitude or I'll change it for you. And it never changed my attitude, I can tell you that. It only made it more sour. But if we think about capacities, if we're developing our members, if we're developing our employees, if we're developing our teams, and we have a developmental work environment, then we're all constantly encouraging each other's growth. That helps engender credibility, because what that's saying is, I care about you, I care about the person you're becoming, I care about that, you know, this is kind of a safe place to fail, that you're going to make mistakes in this learning process. We all are, and we're going to keep growing. But it's encouraging each other to know, where are we growing right now? And this is something, you know, I have various book clubs with certain friends, colleagues, people I consult with, etc. And we just kind of nerd out over this stuff, but we have these conversations frequently, and we hold each other accountable to that. And that builds up credibility with the people I interact with. The other component is capability. This is where we know we are consistently good. Right? So you know what you're really good at. Maybe you're great at thinking on your feet. Maybe you're great at being adaptable and nimble. Maybe you're great with people. The capability is that area that we can rest back on. We sink back into that. When we start, you know, getting into the trenches and everything seems to be chaotic, capability is what we go back to and say, no, this I know I'm good at. This I know is my asset. It's my tool. It's what I can use to help navigate me through certain situations. Know what you're great at. I know for me, I'm talking to people, being authentic and having authentic conversations with them. Sometimes I get in my head too much. I get insecure. I get nervous. We all do, right? Imposter syndrome. And we get into that, and we start, for me, I start to want to get everything right and perfect. And I want to go back and read research, and I want to get the words exactly right and the numbers exactly right. And in the process of doing that, I forget about the connection, the ability to relate information to people, which is one of my stronger suits, right? So that's my capability, and that's something that really gives me credibility. When I get away from that, when I get too far in my head and I lose sight of that thread of what I'm really good at, it undermines my credibility with people. They start to get a little bit nervous and unsettled around me. The last thing is that confidence, right? So that's that area. We're all going to have our confidence knocked down a bit. And this is not, the confidence that builds credibility is not a boastful confidence. It's more like a quiet, calm confidence. That assurance of, I know how to take care of people. I know how to lead. I know my intentions are pure. And I truly believe that the actions I am undertaking, I am doing with the best of intent and for the best outcomes. And that settles us a bit. That gives us that quiet calm that steadies us back. And when we have that, people follow. That gives us some credibility with folks. The biggest thing that I always talk about is when we lose credibility, the quickest thing is to own it, right? And so when we start to think about what's going on with our world right now, friends, it is so easy in the chaos. I mean, it makes sense. I always say that organizations behave like people because they are made up of people, right? So the organization has its own behavior. Your organization is behaving not unlike individual employees are behaving to the stresses that are going on in our world and the unknowns and these uncertainties. And it's very difficult because it's not sustainable to keep up dealing with that level of stress. And so there's going to be spillover. People are going to, tempers are going to flare, doubt's going to creep in. Are we doing the right thing? And mistakes are going to happen. So it's very crucial for us as leaders to remember that credibility means that we really need to focus on how we address the content, the context of the situation that we're in, and owning our own mistakes. I will tell you, and I hate to admit this, but I always do because it's a flaw of mine and it's important for me to admit it. It is not my go-to move to admit when I make a mistake. My initial instinct is to try to find who I can blame. Oh, that hurts so much to admit. I'm so sorry. It's the truth. It's the truth. And I've worked really hard to create coping mechanisms to mitigate that instinct. My oldest sister can tell you for sure that I blamed her for everything when we were growing up. But I have learned the value of standing in front of my team and saying, mea culpa, right? I am guilty. I have made a mistake. It wasn't intentional. And I'm trying to address it and mitigate it as best I can. I hope you'll forgive me, and I hope we can move forward. Humility is the most attractive quality that a human being can have. And I think when we come from a very humble place, it allows us the opportunity to really build, but also restore credibility, especially if it's been lost. So I really want you to be thinking about the fact that sometimes we forget that contexts are constantly changing around us. It's not just COVID, it's everything. People are in periods of transition, and when we are in periods of transition, we don't perform to our best. We typically, there's shifting sands there, and people don't always make the best decisions during periods of transition either. And so there kind of has to be some grace space there for you and I as leaders. But I think it's very important for us to remember it's not just the content of what we're asking people to do or the content of how I know to do my job and how I know how to lead, because certain circumstances or situations or contexts can start to occur and those aren't being addressed. And that alters my ability to perform the way that I should or the way that I can. And so those two things I think are really important. The content and context go together. A lot of times we just focus on content. Make sure that you're remembering the context of everybody around you. Everybody's in a growth cycle. We all are, you are. So think about that. And when we make the inevitable mistakes, own them. Own them. It's hard. It's humble pie. It's not always my favorite thing to do. Each time I do, though, I feel like I'm putting some currency back in my pocket. You know, that I'm becoming a better version of myself by admitting my mistakes, and that's, you know, the journey I'm on. So to this end, when we think about communication and credibility, there was a book several years ago that was very, very popular by Sheryl Sandberg that talked about leaning in, right? And we've all kind of talked about this, is leaning in. Friends, I've got to tell you, there's a time in your career, and I can't tell you when it's going to happen, and I'm really sorry that I can't tell you when it's going to happen, because context changes for each one of us, but there's going to be a time in your career where you're going to have to lean out. You're going to have to learn how to step back, because if you do not, you're going to undermine your credibility with folks. Here's why. The first one is, you've heard me, if you've listened to my other statements, the quote, or my other talks, the quote from Marshall Goldsmith's book, "What got you here won't get you there." And I talk about that a lot when I talk about change management. But this is very true when we're thinking about credibility. Most of us that are in leadership positions have worked very hard to get where we are today. And some of that meant that we had to kind of push to get ourselves to the positions we're in today. We're going to have to learn to dial that down. And this philosophy came about. I was in my office one night, and one of my brilliant MBA students came into my office, and he was complaining, or he was concerned about situations that were happening at work, and that, you know, he's having a coaching up issue. His supervisors weren't really listening to him, and all of this was kind of happening. And this is an incredibly talented young man. But what I was trying to explain to him is what got him here won't get him there. And I came up with this sledgehammer theory. And what I told him was, so much of your career has been you kind of ramming yourself out, being that driver, getting people to get on board with you and get things done. You've been an executor, you've been dependable, you've been reliable, and everybody's counted on you, and you've gotten all of these things done, and people have listened to you. That got you into this leadership position you're in, but it's not going to make friends with the executives who are above you now, the people that are supervising you. And I said, the sledgehammer isn't your tool today. The tool you need today is the scalpel, right? You need the finesse. He said, well, I hate politics. I said, well, tough. Because if you care about your people, you're going to care about using the right tool. And you have to use the right tool with how you communicate to the people around you. So my friends, you have worked hard in your careers to get into the leadership position you are today, but the context is changing. You're going to have to think about how you communicate with those around you, especially those above you. You cannot communicate with them the way that you previously communicated with supervisors. The context has changed. You're in a different position, and you have other people who are counting on you to have credibility with your superiors, to be able to protect them. So that means you're going to have to find ways to decrease resistance. If you keep trying to be a sledgehammer, walls are going to come up. People are not going to listen to you. You are going to lose credibility, and there is going to be a resistance component there. That does you so much harm, and it does your people that you lead harm. Use the right tool. So I really, really think this is important to be thinking about when you think about the context of just how you've grown in your own career. Okay, so I really want you to just kind of take some time today and think about that. This is something that it came out of just really a very normal conversation with one of my mentees. But since I kind of came up with this sledgehammer theory, I've talked about it with other students, with other clients, and my consulting, and people come up to me and say, I never realized I'm a sledgehammer, and people aren't listening to me anymore. They did, they don't anymore. And the more that I keep being that sledgehammer, the more they're going to quit listening to me. Ah, yes, light bulbs. Oh, grasshopper, right? So I hope that this is kind of giving you a light bulb moment. All right, so as we move on to situational leadership, because I've just talked to you through this idea of evaluating your credibility in various contexts. Situational leadership model is undoubtedly my favorite leadership style to talk about. This is something that I learned when I was still in corporate life. I got to go learn it from the Ken Blanchard company, who created the situational leadership model. I've gotten to do some great work with the folks that actually came up with this model, and it's been humbling for me to do that. And my students always love this, so I hope that this is something that you enjoy as well. So essentially, what the situational leadership model talks to us about is that you and I as leaders are going to have to change our leadership styles based on the developmental levels of our followers. You and I can't just sit here and say, that's my leadership style. And it's always funny, I get asked that question a lot, where people say, well, what's your leadership style? And what I always say is developmental, right? Because that's kind of broad, but it's still the heart of what I believe in too. So what situational leadership model says is you and I don't lead the way that you and I feel is best. We lead in the best way that our followers need us to lead. And it's two broad-based types that you and I kind of live in naturally. So some of you are going to be more analytical, or I'm kind of driver oriented if you've ever taken the social styles assessments that I use. And if you have not and you want access to that, I'm happy to give that to you. You can shoot me an email. So individuals who are more task oriented tend to be more directive in their leadership. This is a very broad kind of general statement here, but you tend to really focus on the goal, the task at hand. And that oftentimes means, setting parameters and really kind of a one-way communication style from you to your followers. It doesn't mean you cannot be the other style. It just means this is kind of your natural home. This is where you kind of settle in the most. This is your go-to default. Others of us that are more expressive personalities or amiable personalities tend to be live at home in a supportive leadership style. That means that we tend to facilitate two-way communication. We kind of tend to at times be the cheerleaders. And so our leadership style that's more natural to us is more supportive. And so situational leadership lives with these two kind of components, broad-based components. And that is based on the follower's development level. So the way that we evaluate our followers is on a spectrum between the levels of their commitment. So how dedicated are they to doing the work? How motivated are they? How much do they desire to actually do the work? How excited are they about this? How inspired are they? And their competence. How skilled are they? How much do they know of what they're doing? So I'm going to talk you through the situational leadership model here. And this model, if you'll look at the bottom bar, so the bottom bar talks about the developmental levels of our followers. The corresponding box at the top with the color codes talks about mine and your leadership styles that correspond with the developmental style or developmental level of our followers. So let me talk about the developmental style of our followers. So oftentimes you will have an employee who is brand new to a task, maybe not to their job, but maybe it's a new task you've given them. And they're super excited, right? It's like, put me in, coach. Baseball references today. So they're super excited. They have no idea what they're doing, but they just want to be in. And so that requires you and I as leaders to be much more directive. We do not need to give them pats on the back at this point. We don't need to be their cheerleaders. We don't really need to coach and support them because they have the commitment level, right? They're incredibly excited. They just don't know what they're supposed to do. So you and I have to be much more directive in how we navigate those individuals. It's not micromanaging, friends. They don't know what they're doing. This is very much helping them, okay? Now, once we've been directive, we've gotten them on their feet, they know what's expected of them, they're doing their work. In the D2 level, they have a little bit of an understanding of what they're doing, but not everything. But they maybe have just suffered their first setback. Maybe they've just kind of, something didn't work out quite right. And so their confidence is lagging. And so this requires you and I to be much more of a coach as a leader. We still have to be directive because they don't know all the ins and outs. They know more than they did in the D1. But because they're kind of unsure, we've got to coach a little bit more, right? We've got to be a little bit more supportive in how we approach them and give them encouragement. D3s are the most crucial areas. This is where we lose people, friends. This is where we lose them. Our research shows that, really close to about 80% of the average workforce globally is disengaged. and that's costing organizations about $34,000 of each of those individuals' salaries per year. That's staggering numbers. Those individuals are D3s, 80% of the workforce, D3s. What this means is they know how to do their job. They're unfulfilled, they're disengaged, they're unmotivated. This is where you and I have to do our best leadership work. This is what we have to commit to. Because it's not the poor performers in our organizations that are going to hurt us, right? Hurt the sustainability of our organization. It's the folks that are doing their jobs just well enough not to get fired, but not well enough to take us forward. Those are our D3s. We've got to get those folks engaged. So here's where you and I have to be a lot more supporting. And a mistake that well-intentioned leaders make is that they start to be directive with those individuals. Oh, does that backfire? Oh my goodness. You tell someone who already knows how to do their job. You know, my nickname is Ginger Ninja. My students call me when I get feisty, and that's a quick way to do that. And you know individuals that are like this, you might be that way as well, kindred spirits here. The mistake that a lot of leaders make is when individuals are not performing, they assume that they don't know how to do their job. It's not competence in this situation, it's their commitment levels. So, Mandolen, how do we fix this? Well, ways that we can fix this is having conversations with our members. Hey, what is meaningful to you about your work? What do you really like about your work? What is the accomplishment that you've had here in your time here that you're most proud of? Connect them back to their work, connect them back to those victories, connect them back to the wins, right? Also, having conversations about their career goals, their pathways. So many of us are waiting for someone to come up and tap us on the shoulders and say, you got it, kid. Let me take you to the next level. And the reality is that just doesn't happen. Or it does, but it doesn't happen with the frequency I wish it did. No one should be more invested in your own development than yourself. You have to take charge of that. And so having career pathway conversations, if you find yourself right now in a D3 area, I want you to be coaching up. I want you to be having those conversations, and make sure you're not being a sledgehammer as you do it, but have those conversations with the people above you about what's my career path? Here's the work that I find meaningful. Can I do more work like this in my role today? Or can I get to a role where I can do things like that? And so once we get our individuals past the D3 level, we start to shift into delegation. I always love this, because usually when I'm face-to-face with folks, I'll say, who here is good at delegating? And there's always like one hand. And then I say, how many of us are not great at delegating? And like so many of us raise our hands, including myself. You know, and I hear it all the time, right? I could just do the work myself and it would be done so much faster. Great. But here's the thing, friends. If we're truly developmental leaders, every time we do not delegate to our members, to our employees, to our followers, we are crippling them. We are condemning them to not growing, right? We're condemning them to who they used to be. We're condemning them to a box. We're not allowing them to grow. You are in leadership positions today because someone took a chance on you. Take a chance on your people. Does it mean they will make mistakes? Yes, probably. Again, it goes back to credibility. It goes back to having transparent conversations with them, creating a safe place for people to fail, to know that if they make a mistake, they can come to you and say, mea culpa, I am guilty. Help me correct this mistake. When you have that type of partnership, that's really, really important. And so I think we all could probably be better at delegating. And here's something else that's important to think about, framing. When we delegate, let's make sure that we talk to our followers and say, I'm not passing on my work to you. I'm giving you this task because I trust you, I believe in you, and I want you to have the ability to grow. I want you to have opportunities that help you expand and be more integrated in the organization and with the team. And so this is something that I see as an opportunity for you, not something that I'm just trying to pass the buck, right? Because sometimes people think that, oh, well, my boss just passes off everything and puts their feet up on their desk, right? And so we really need to make sure we frame that well for our followers also, and letting them know why we're delegating the work to them, and letting them know that they have our full confidence, because that's really important. So this situational leadership model is quite powerful. It's quite simple, but it's quite powerful. And we live this cycle over and over again throughout our lives. I always make a joke that it's like dating. You know, like in the beginning when you're dating someone, you get really excited. You don't know where it's going to go, but like they call you and they text, and oh, you can't wait to talk to them. You get the butterflies. And then you know, as you guys kind of start dating longer, you get into that D2 phase where all of a sudden you're like, really? You clip your toenails in the kitchen? I'm not quite sure about this. You get into the D3 phase, which is when they call and, you know, you're talking to a telemarketer and you don't answer their call, or you're listening to Journey and you got to listen to your jam on the radio and you'll call them later. And then D4 is, you know, you get married, you move in together, you break up, whatever that is, right? So if you kind of think about how we progress through these cycles, our members are constantly progressing through these cycles as well. You and I are progressing. When I said everything is a growth phase, it is. So we're going to be going through these cycles. So it's important to identify the people around you, where they're at, and how you can flex your leadership style to benefit them best. So I want you to consider, and I created, there's a situational leadership model handout here. The handout that is going to be posted on the website is it not only has the model that I just showed you, but it gives you some buzzwords, some descriptors of each of the phases of the developmental level and each of the phases of the leadership styles. And I think that could be really beneficial. So it gives you, you know, kind of descriptors. So you can kind of look at the people around you and think, how would I describe them? And it can maybe help you be more prescriptive in diagnosing where they're at, and then prescribing what type of leadership style you want to use. So I'm not going to click on it because I always get nervous when I use the technology that I'll mess up the screen or something, but it will be there, and it's, I hope, very beneficial. I want you to be able to consider, you know, the goals that you're asking your followers to achieve. Remember that context is really important. You want to know if it's very complex. Are there a lot of steps? Are there a lot of opportunities for them to lose confidence or to not have the competence, right? If those are the two things we're measuring here, is there an opportunity where we could lose those? Are there too many moving parts where we could potentially lose that for our followers? And are we setting them up for failure in that sense? And therefore, are they sufficiently skilled and equipped? Have we done everything through all of that process for this complex goal or non-complex goal to actually set them up for success? And then, do they have the desire to actually do it? You know, I have a friend who, if they don't want to do something, they don't tell people they don't want to do it. They just don't. Like, you always have those friends that say that they're going to come to a gathering, you know, pre-COVID, and then they just never show up. And you're like, just tell me, and I won't plan on you coming if you don't want to come. We have to have those, and that goes back to our credibility. If we have the credibility with our people, they're going to tell us whether they have the desire or not. And so we really have to create those safe spaces where we're having those conversations. And so, you know, a final reminder before we kind of shift over to questions, because I want to make sure I give you ample time for questions. You know, in leadership, it's not how far we advance ourselves, but it's how far we advance others. When we start to think about people around us, you know, the negative people, nobody ever likes being around that. The person that does nothing but talks badly about other people, nobody likes being around those people. The people who talk positively, the people who are supporting other people, you know, I think I've said this in another talk before. If the people in your circle are not your biggest advocates, you don't have a circle, you have a cage, right? So we have to be advancing other people. We have to be advocating for other people. the quickest way to promote ourselves is to promote other people. And that's not an inauthentic approach. It's remembering that, you know, every time we make other people look good, we look good by association of that. And that's something that means you and I have to lead people in the way that serves them best, not in the way that serves us best. Because when we focus on them, it will take care of us. It will take care of the things that you and I, the goals that you and I have for ourselves. It will take care of our growth. When I lead my students and my mentees or my clients that I consult with, when I focus on their needs and the value they're getting out of it, not the value I want to get out of it or the value I want to give them, when I focus on how can they use this, how is this beneficial to them, I start to grow. I start to look at things through a different lens, and more often than not, I hit my mark so much better than if I was directing that myself, right? Because I have blind spots too. We all do. And so really thinking about the best way to advance other people, the rest is gravy. Focus on them, and the rest is going to come up, you know, on the back end of that. So with that, Jared, I'm going to throw it to you to ask you if we've got any questions or feedback about the credibility component or the situational leadership model, or just anything else that folks may have for me.
Well, thank you very much. We do have some questions. Right now we have 3 questions.
Excellent.
And yes, the first question is, how can we encourage a leader that struggles with the self-confidence in their ability? So I guess the question would be, how can we encourage them to be, to have more of their confidence as they move forward in their leadership development?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's an important one because studies are showing anywhere from 73 to 75% of us have imposter syndrome. And, you know, a lot of us think, I mean, I remember getting my MBA, getting my PhD. I just knew somebody was going to call out that I was a fraud. I just knew it. I still feel that way most of the time. Say that that's natural, that we never get rid of the butterflies. They just learn to fly in formation. So ways that we can build credibility, or confidence with folks, oftentimes is going back and reminding people of what they're good at. Settling back into that quiet comfort of, I know I'm consistently good at these things. So, for example, I once had a manager. She was telling me, this was years ago when I was in corporate, and she said I needed to go get in my team's grill. Now, I'm pretty colloquial, I will admit, but I don't get in people's grill, and I don't really know what that means entirely. And I remember telling her that that was her leadership style, not the way that I develop people, and that for me to wear her leadership style would be like me trying to wear her clothes. Now, I'm 4'11" and 102 pounds. She was like 5'11" and about 250 pounds. And we both just started laughing because I said, it doesn't fit me. I can't adopt your leadership style if it's inauthentic to who I am. It'll be abrasive to everyone that I come in contact with. So I think sometimes when we doubt ourselves, when we get a lack of confidence, we get kind of too much in our heads, and we start to think about how other people do it. Don't compare your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20. Sit and know what it is that you're working on, your growth points, the things that you've already grown into, the things that you're proud that you've accomplished, that you've grown into, those areas that you know you do consistently well. I know without a doubt that I build teams. There's a lot of things I'm not good at. I have a very technical document that's due this week, and I am not great at that, and I've had to get a lot of help from my friends. And that's great to get help from them because we work as a team. I can build teams. I know that about myself. I know that I care about people. It's an authentic thing, and that is always going to be my strong suit. So that is my capability, right? That's the thing I know I do consistently well. So I can always kind of settle back into that, and which gives me a lot of confidence. I'm going into areas, I'm creating a technical document. I don't know how to do this stuff. I don't have patience for it. I overlook things because I'm not detail oriented. And I just don't have the desire really for a lot of these to do more technical kind of things. And when I think about that, I think, but I know people who are, and I have great relationships with them, and they will help. And it's settling back into that and utilizing my strong suit to leverage those other areas to build up my confidence. So I hope that those kind of examples help resonate with the individual who asked that question. If it doesn't, please reach back out to me. If there's something I can help you with, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. More questions have come in.
Okay, great.
Women are frequently told to lean in, force your way into the conversation, grab a seat at the table if you are offered one, but that sledgehammer still seems required once you join the higher ranks of leadership. How can a woman transition to scaffolding from sledgehammering successfully?
Love this question. Here's the biggest thing to remember. We act like we still have to earn a seat at the table, and we forget that we already are at the table. We already have the seat at the table. A lot of times credibility is about being invited into the room and allowed to stay there. I was working with a female executive recently, and she started talking to me about, is one of my clients, she started talking to me about how to develop people and how important it was. And I thought, does she not know I have a PhD in this stuff? What does she think I do? I live this stuff. And I felt my resistance to her actually coming on. I was really kind of irritated and annoyed. And it dawned on me, this is someone who has worked really hard in her career to be taken seriously. She doesn't realize she's at the table. She doesn't realize she's in the room already. So she has spent most of her career telling people how smart she is, how much she deserves to be in the room, without realizing she's already there. Many of us are already there, and we forget to settle into that. We keep trying to tell people we belong when we already belong. We're already there. And so I really see that we do ourselves a disservice the more that we keep trying to explain ourselves, the more that we keep trying to validate our presence in the room. Because it should be a situation where we come in and say, I'm good at my job just like the man next to me. And I know what I know, and I'm good at it, and we all work together. We all work in a team environment. We don't have to keep proving ourselves. There's in that Marshall Goldsmith book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, he talks about a mistake that a lot of leaders make is telling people how smart they are. And I will admit that is a flaw of mine at times. I default to that when I feel really insecure. And all it does is undermine my credibility with folks, is when I sit there and try to tell people that I belong. So I love that question, but I really would encourage you to evaluate if you're not already in the room. And if you are there ways that you can settle into that and lean out of that a little bit? Decrease resistance if you're feeling the resistance. And understanding that the sledgehammer was an important tool in the beginning. Now you've got to start using finesse. How do you use finesse? How are you creating collaboration with people? How are you advancing other people? How are you helping other people get wins? Because that shows your value as well. When you show that you're versatile, when you show your value. Mistake that we make is we keep telling people how smart we are and that we belong, and all that does is make it about us. It's not the Mandolen show. It's got to be about other people. Keep thinking about that, and hopefully that gives you some guidance. It's a great question. Great question. What else you got, Jared?
We have 3 more questions here for the remaining time. Next question. So right now we've had layoffs and we're working with very small staff. How do you keep your D4s motivated when they, in parentheses, and me, are all feeling overwhelmed with so much on our plates?
Yeah. It's real talk. It's transparency. It's, I always say that I can't motivate you. I can only create a context and an environment where you feel motivated, where you feel inspired. And so a lot of that for me is focusing on areas where look at where we've grown, celebrating our small wins. I will celebrate any small victory. I get very excited about things like that. Celebrate the small wins that you've got. Champion your team members as they continue to do the work. Keep thanking them. Gratitude is so important. Letting them know that you see them. Asking for that from your boss, because you said yourself included, and I understand that. And I think it's important for you to coach up in those situations. We cannot change some of the conditions that we are in right now, but we can shift our perceptions of what's going on and the way that we create a context around all of this. And that's very important for us to be thinking about. We can't change the situation, but how do we change the context? So changing the context is really about, again, having transparent conversations. Guys, I know that we're all tired. I know that we're dragging. I know that we're great at our work and we're doing more with less. Let's try to find ways of what are we most proud of this week? What have we accomplished this week that we can be proud of? Where have we, what are our big concerns for the future? Having transparent conversations. We won't always have answers, but people need to be heard. They need to be seen. I have a friend of mine, he's lovely. He's a great mentor. And he's the #1 employee engagement scholar in the world, Dr. Brad Schuck out of the University of Louisville. And Brad always tells me, Mandolen, I value you, I see you, I appreciate you, and I love you. And what a great friend. And there's a couple of us that say things like that to each other, where we just say, I see you, I value you, I appreciate you. Knowing that people's work matters is impactful. Keep having that conversation. You cannot have it enough. You need to keep telling your people that what they do is important and that they are important.
Thank you. Next question. Is there any particular quadrant in the situational leadership model that seems to work most effectively during these times of constant change and uncertainty?
Oh, that's a great question. Perhaps maybe we would want to settle into the coaching role, because that does require, the directive component as well as that supportive component. You and I, as leaders right now, are going to be having to still be directive because we're navigating things that we haven't navigated before. So directive seems to make sense. And people are still going to need support, just like we were talking about the D4s. I really think, folks need support right now because of the level of uncertainty in the situations in which we're navigating. So I think probably that coaching that if we're treating, if you kind of wanted to think about everybody being in a D2 phase right now, they have some competence, but they have uncertainty, which could potentially impact their motivation or their commitment levels to the tasks at hand, for sure. Yeah, great question.
Thank you. Pardon me, the final question of today's session. The hardest times in leading can be knowing when to switch gears, D1, 2, 3, or 4. Any tip to trigger to know when to try another tactic?
I think a lot of times, right, and so it kind of goes back to, talking about leaning in and leaning out when we're sledgehammers and when we're scalpels, that it's almost like there's an invisible line and it doesn't happen overnight. It's very insidious, right? It just kind of creeps up on us. I'm in the D1, D2, D3, D4 levels. I think a lot of it is gauging, where our people are. I'm going to see if I can't get that. Yeah. So what I did do on this handout that I was talking about a moment ago is I gave some descriptors that gives us a little bit of an understanding of, maybe how we could diagnose where our followers are at, and then how we can prescribe our leadership style to accommodate them. But ultimately, it's always going to be us having regular one-on-ones with our people, knowing where they're at, knowing what they're afraid of, knowing what they're proud of, knowing how confident they feel about their work, what they feel is working well, what they feel a little uncertain about. When we have those kind of understandings, when we're listening and we can hear them talking and we can hear that it's a motivation issue or a lack of engagement, that gives us some clues of where they're at and how to diagnose them, right? Because that's really what our job. Just like, you know, as managers, we're diagnosing process flow in our organizations and your quality control and all of these types of things, which I love to do. I nerd out a lot on that stuff. But just, you know, as leaders, we have to be diagnosing what's going on with our people too. So you really have to kind of think about yourself as a diagnostician. So be listening to things and be thinking about, what are they telling me about their commitment level? What are they telling me about their competency level, right? Do they feel like they're in over their head? Is that just a confidence issue, or is that a competence issue? And that will give you some guidance to know what area they're in predominantly, and that should give you some launch pad to be able to shift into where they're at. I thought I had, oh, I didn't have it here. There. So this tells you a little bit about ways that you could think about your employees. And this is on the, it's linked up on the Google Slides that's going to be posted with today's presentation. So you'll have access to this.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Mull, for another great presentation and your strategies to help us understand what situational leadership is and how we can apply the mentioned techniques to our daily work. We all appreciate your time and expertise, and we are all very fortunate to have you and the resources of Rockford University available to us all. Thank you to all that attended. We hope you found value in today's presentation, and you can take what you have learned here today with you back to your workplace. Real quick, I just want to do some housekeeping. July 30th, next week, July 30th, IMEC will be having a webinar. We'll be hosting a webinar with IMEC, Database Mining for Fast Track Business Development. Certainly a very interesting topic and something to tune in. August 20th, we have our fourth session of Ed Talks with Dr. Mandolen Mull. That will be the strategic alignment and performance, identifying common reasons as to why organizations fail to achieve their desired results and why employees fail to achieve performance metrics. Definitely going to want to listen to that one, tune into that one. That looks very interesting as well. For more information on these webinars and other RAEDC resources, please visit the Rockford Area Economic Development Council website. And please do not hesitate to reach out to Rockford University for additional support and resources. We have an absolute powerhouse of a university right here at our region's center point. Again, thank you all for attending today's presentation. Enjoy the weekend and have a good day.
Thank you.